Okay, last but not least, there's this question that we sort of have. Can we reconcile sort of deontology with consequentialism? Because there are elements of both that seem intuitively correct, but they stand, at least at first glance, as diametrically opposed, right? Theories. I had to say theories because otherwise I would have broken out and singing Hamilton. Sorry about that. Right. Well, there have been many, many efforts by various philosophers to do exactly this, reconcile the two. And one of the most infamous versions of this comes from W.D. Ross, uh, who was a specialist in ancient philosophy and in moral philosophy. And for whatever reason, this is a complete aside, I knew about Ross in both of these contexts for about 8 years before it finally clicked. 10 years before it finally clicked that Ross, the ancient, like the expert in like Aristotle and Plato, W.D. Ross, the expert in Aristotle and Plato, was the same one as the very raw as this W.D. Ross, who I learned about in my own intro to ethics course, right? Or my own intro to philosophy course, right? And when I finally pieced that together, like I cursed so loudly, um, I said, "Son of a bitch," so loudly that from behind, that it traveled through 3 sets of closed doors to my roommate, who was outside on our apartment balcony at the time, smoking a cigarette, and he dropped his cigarette and crushed it, came running in wondering what the hell was wrong, if he needed to call 911, had his cell phone in hand ready to do that, um, only to realize that I'd just been cursed myself out for having been an oblivious idiot for 8 years. Right? He laughed so hard at that. Um, okay, so story time done and over with. W.D. Ross was a philosopher, one of the many who, in the later 1800s um, and early 1900s, tried to reconcile deontology and consequentialism together. Uh, he tried to reconcile. He's one of the ones who also made some advancements through doing this. He made some advancements in consequentialism as a result of doing this. Ross was first and foremost, his theory is primarily deontological in nature, right? Primarily deontological. And consequentialism for Ross is a secondary feature of doing ethics, right? First and foremost, he thinks we should concern ourselves with what he called the prima facie duties, right? Prima facie duties, or prima facie is just Latin for first face or first look, right? First glance, right? So these are obligations, duties, that we have just by looking at them, right? If I told you don't kill, you don't have to think about don't kill people. You don't have to think about it. You just go, yeah, no, that seems sensible, right? Don't steal. Oh, yeah, that seems sensible. Don't lie. Yeah, that seems sensible. Help others. Yeah, sensible. Improve oneself. Of course, right? So all of Kant's major duties, ethical obligations that he concludes with, right, are essentially what Ross includes in his prima facie duties. He includes a couple of others as well, but for the most part, all the ones that are in all the of Kant's perfect and imperfect duties are a part of this. Right? Now, what makes them prima facie is that we can confirm for us for ourselves through reason that we should do them, but we don't really need to confirm through reason that we should do these things in a general way, because at first glance they just seem sensible, right? We don't need to take the time to actually think these through and logic through them. Ross does, and he says that we can too, and we'll come to the same sort of conclusions about why they're prima facie duties, but we don't actually need to justify them. Right? They're right because they're right. They just intuitively are. So we must first act according to these prima facie duties, PFDs for short, according to Ross. This to him forms the basis of morality, yet sometimes, it must be admitted, PFDs will come into conflict with each other. Something like help others will come into conflict with don't kill, right? Or let's take it to the realm of fiction. The case of Robin Hood, or the Arrow, if you want to go with that, right? The Green Arrow. Um, Thinking of the comic books more than the TV show. TV show was good for the first 2.5 seasons, and then, but yeah, Robin Hood, right? Help others, don't steal, right? But Robin Hood helped others by stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. How did he justify this? Well, in this case, two of the PFDs conflicted with each other. Help others, don't steal, right? In such cases, Ross says, where there are conflicts between the PFDs, and, and he says that this is where all of our moral quandaries actually arise, is when these prima facie duties come into conflict with each other. Because otherwise, we just do the moral thing, right? Kind of naturally. Um, It's only when these duties come into conflict with each other that we get the sort of tension that alerts us to the fact that we're in a moral situation that calls for something more than just adherence to the prima facie duties, which are failing us at this time because they're in conflict with each other. So, where such conflict arises, Ross says that we should examine the consequences and do what produces the most prima facie goodness, right? So what at a glance is going to produce the best consequences, right? Um, this doesn't just mean immediate consequences, but just looking at it, what's going to produce the best consequences? Well, it could, a Robin Hood could have, not stolen, right, and helped others in a different way, but that wouldn't have solved the problem, right? He could have killed the Sheriff of Nottingham and King John and all the other nobles who were stealing uh, from the common folk, but that wouldn't have solved the problem. There would have just been new nobles to take the place, right? A new king, a new despot, right? To take the place and continue running things as in as corrupt a fashion as possible. So he stole what was not rightfully the nobles and returned it to the peasants, right? Um, and so he did, based off of his own analysis of what would produce the best results, he decided that using his skills that he'd acquired in the Crusades to pursue justice on an individual basis, right, through from stealing to the rich and giving to the poor, was the best thing to do. Right? It was better to aid his man than to abide by the prima facie duty of not stealing. In this way, Ross manages to distinguish between what is morally right, or what is right, right, our duties, and what is good, right? What is moral and produces the best consequence, without fully separating them. So he says that the reason that the PFDs and the duties, uh, the PFDs are duties, rather, is because what is right, more often than not, lends itself to what is also moral and good. It's only when we cannot fulfill all the prima facie duties because either they come into conflict or a situation pops up where violating one of them is better overall, that we have to. So it's only in such situations that we have to abandon the project of doing what's right, committing to proper action, and concern ourselves only with what is good, right? The consequences.